Reddit, tell me your proudest moment speaking up against a jerk in public. High school algebra II. My teacher starts yelling at a shy kid in the class because he doesn't understand how to factor binomials. The kid tears up, but she doesn't stop until he is all out bawling. So some other kids jump in and tell her to stop, but she makes them quiet down by threatening to call their parents. So I stand up and say, "Stop, lady." The teacher threatens to call my mom, and I say, "Okay, fine." Then I walk over to the school phone, dial my mom's cell number and put it on speaker. The teacher doesn't want to back down, so plays along and tells my mom everything, and ends with how my mother should ground me for a very long time. After hearing this long story, my mom, in her thick Asian accent, says, "Please say to my son I'm so proud of him." Mom win. This is the story of a buddy of mine, but totally worth telling. He's Pakistani, super friendly and hilarious. This was October 2001 in New York. We're in college. He's online at a Taco Bell during lunch. This heavy white trash looking lady is glaring at him. He finally looks at her and smiles to try and break the tension. She just blurts out, "Your people did a great job with the World Trade Center." Whole place equals dead silence. He waits a beat, then responds, "Yeah. Well, your people did a great job in Oklahoma City." A few years back, I was riding a subway train back home. I see this girl sitting down minding her own business, and a group of 3 slightly older guys sitting a bit further off. One of the guys starts throwing some derogatory comments at her, and is getting louder and more aggressive by the minute. The other passengers in the train are watching the entire scene unfold, but they don't do anything, either because they don't care enough or too scared to get involved. Finally, the taunting guy snickers and tells his 2 friends, "Watch what I'm going to do next." He starts walking over to the girl, being physically larger than him, intercepts him before he reaches the girl and yell at him to stand down. He slides over in an attempt to sit next to her, and I squeeze in between them. For the remainder of the ride, I sit between the girl and the guy, who is now visibly uncomfortable at having been put in his place. Before I get off at my stop, one of the older passengers smiles at me. UCSB, Isla Vista, CA, 1997. Cops barged into the house we were partying in to tell us to turn down the music because neighbors had complained. Our neighbors were partying with us. All of the neighbors were young college kids. We turned down the music, but they started checking bedroom doors. Since we lived in quite the party house, all the roomies knew to keep their doors locked. The female cop started yelling, "WHO lives here. Someone needs to open these doors." So I walk over, beer in hand, over 21, and say, "I'm no lawyer, but we have done what you told us to do. We turned down the music, and unless you can come up with a search warrant, you are breaking the law and I have to ask you to leave." She gets in my face and starts threatening arrest and shit, and I told her I was on private property, obeying all laws, and that if someone did not show me a search warrant I would press charges because they were trespassing. The oldest cop comes over and grabs her by the arm and says, "We need to go." They left immediately. I felt like a hero. Taken from decoys a little while back. I was in a bar in England talking to friends of friends. One was being a twat and I had a bit of a go at him. He got rather annoyed with me and said, "Do you know who my father is?" I replied, "No." "Have you tried asking your mum?" Drinks were spat. It was John Major's son, Prime Minister at the time. I was sitting with my friends, the lame kids, in HS during lunch on afternoon. Our clique sat next to the bros. One day a mentally challenged kid walks by our 2 groups and someone from the bro group decided it would be funny if he jumped on this kid's back and started riding him like a raging bull. Some people were laughing but most were in shock. For some reason I, 5'11" and 125 pounds, decided to throw the guy. 6 foot and 170 pounds. Off of the kid. I start yelling at him and telling him that he is a piece of shit. I then proceed to get my ass beat. Broken nose and all. Out of nowhere a group of kids start beating the shit out of the bully and thought that I wasn't hurt too badly. They thanked me for actually doing the right thing. To this day my nose is still crooked. 3 for not going into too much detail and or any errors. I'm writing this on my phone during work. BC Reddit is now blocked on my network. Didn't involve speaking, but one afternoon my friends and I were driving in my little mini, and on this quiet road there were a bunch of jerk kids throwing stuff into the road. I swerved to avoid a stone they threw and they started jeering and birding us and shouting wankers, but I carried on driving until my friend said let's go back and scare the shit out of them. The road was quiet, so I slammed on the brakes. Put it in reverse and was intending to just quickly pull up next to them and throw some rubbish from my car at them. Unfortunately, because I suck at driving, I reversed too fast. And when I braked again I must have moved the steering wheel involuntarily. Because I somehow performed an epic and pretty much exact 180 spin. Screeching tires and everything. And ended up stopped right next to them. They immediately shat their pants and legged it. Ignorant of the fact that I had no intention of looking so badass. I hit a guy over the head with a 1-stroke 2 full tub of butter popcorn while screaming UFCking suck. After the 5th time he answered his phone during Avatar. Does this count? As a kid I saw the bully that usually picked on me toss a 4-year-old down a hill. I spoke with my fists rather than my words. I lost anyway, but the kid was able to run home safely. I was at a Dollar Tree store and this woman was harassing the cashier. The cashier kept telling the woman she needed her receipt if she wanted cash back. But she could offer her a store credit. I mean, this poor cashier was doing everything not to say anything that could get her to lose her job as this woman was swearing at her. So I started to clap. She turned and was like, what the FCK do you want, bitch? And I told her she was putting on a beautiful performance. That she needed to shut up and stop being a bitch to the cashier or get the FCK out of the store. She went to go say something nasty to me. But I held up my hand and said conversation over. She was pissed. Called me a bitch and stomped out. Everyone clapped and the cashier thanked me. I told her no one should be treated like that. Then I went next door to the food store and bought all the cashier's cake. I was at the store with my mom and some kids were running around causing problems. It was around Christmas time, so she said, "You guys better be good or Santa won't bring you anything." Their mother stormed over and yelled at my mother that what she did with her kids wasn't any of her business. She coyly replied, "Oh, my mistake. It's just from the way they were acting. I thought they were orphans." This thread gives me hope for humanity in ways I can't describe. Keep being awesome, guys. I don't have a story of my own. But my boyfriend likes to tell this story, so I think he'd appreciate me sharing. He's a big guy. He was always big for his age. So when he was in elementary school his parents told him never to fight. Always to just tell a teacher or an adult. Because the larger kid would be more likely to get into trouble even if he was just defending himself. So he was usually the target of bullies. Partially due to his size and partially because he did nothing back. Telling on them amounted to nothing really. One day the teacher called his parents because they couldn't really stop the bullying since it never happened in front of them. His mom sat him down and said it's okay to defend yourself. The next day 4 of these bullies come around. Not knowing that she had changed. As soon as one threw a punch he knocked 2 out. Threw a third onto a fence and just sat on the 4th until he cried. He did not get in trouble. I wish I was that badass when I was little. The 2008 campaign was in full swing. I was at lunch at a local bar eating and reading. The bar was playing Fox News Muted and an Obama rally was being covered. I kept hearing the 2 gentlemen in the booth next to me making racist remarks. Someone should put a bullet in his head and those aren't real white people behind him. No real white person would follow that guy. Among other things. I was fuming. I wanted to throw my fork into their foreheads. I finished eating. Paid my bill and waited. The two men finished up and began to walk out. They were both well dressed, Caucasian and in their early 60s. I said, "Excuse me." The men turned. "Maybe you should keep your racist remarks to yourself." The man was stunned and slightly embarrassed. Maybe I should. Yeah. Are you a Christian? Excuse me? Are you a Christian? I most certainly am. Then maybe you should act like it. The men nodded and scurried away, humbled by a 27-year-old atheist. I was in a redneck biker club in a medium-sized town with some friends recently. The place was full to capacity and I was one of 2 Pakistani Indian people in the whole place. There were probably 5 or 6 other non-white people floating around. If that many. Anyways, I got separated from my group and started looking for them in the dance floor. Some guy grabbed my shoulder and turned me around. Looked me straight in the eye and said, "Shouldn't you be driving a cab or something?" I walked up to him, gave him a huge hug, and said, "Oh my god. I can't believe I found you. Your mother probably never told you. But I'm your father." "That's right. I was f***ing your mom for a while." I turned around and walked away. He couldn't respond. A friend of mine is a rather fey gay man. Once in a gas station in small town Iowa, an employee called him a f-got as he was leaving. He stopped, turned around, grabbed the guy, picked him up by the collar, and said, "Sometimes we bash back," and threw him into one of the large candy display. Everyone, including myself, was in total shock. He calmly walked outside and got into his car. I was in a coffee shop and the woman in the line in front of me was letting her 5 or 6-year-old kid run amok in the store. He was knocking shit over, breaking stuff and annoying people. The last straw was when he kicked the granny in the line behind me. The mom saw it and just grinned, so I said the following loud enough for the entire store to hear. "Excuse me, ma'am. It's blatantly obvious that your nanny has the day off, so would you mind if I showed your kid what a firm smack feels like? That way you can continue to not act like a parent." She stormed out. People shot me grins of approval and the granny gently grabbed my arm and said, "Either there was no hope for your generation, but I guess I was wrong." Made my day. This is pretty lame compared to most of these stories, but it was definitely my proudest moment. I was in middle school. At the lunch table, there were 3 dickheads on a roll, picking on this poor girl. I sat eating in silence for a while, and they finally started getting really nasty. I simply said, "That's enough. Assholes." Being quite a bit larger than I was, they started their macho posturing, complete with threats of violence. I shrugged, and they turned their attention to me for the remainder of the lunch period. About a year later, in high school, the girl told me how much of an effect it had on her being stood up for. She said it was the kindest thing anyone had ever done for her. We dated for a year after that. I would have owned this thread if the title was, "Tell me what you should have said to that jerk in public that you practiced in your head hours after the incident." I can't stop reading. Boston, North Station Orange Line platform. 2004. When the SJC was reviewing the legal status of gay marriage, dude used to sit there reading the Bible very loud during evening commute, telling us all we were going to hell unless we strike down gay marriage. There's a fine line between free speech and aggravating the hell out of me with your religion speak. As far as I'm concerned, you surrender your rights when you deny others their own. If he saw someone rolling their eyes or whatever, he would get up and get right in their face yelling the Bible verses. He started towards some young Boston co-ed and I yelled that he needed to leave her alone. Mind you, the platform is packed with people. She wasn't in much real danger, but I was sick of his shit. So he comes over to me and starts to berate me, and at one point says, "I've never seen a gay person love Jesus." To which I yelled back, "And I've never seen a gay person try to impress his views on others." The platform cheered. I'm a week from graduating college from a liberal arts hippie community known as Hampshire College in Western Mass. A graduate from the 70s came and read from his memoir to a lecture hall of students. Was ill-received and harassed by a student about his admittedly scathing portrayal of the college in his day. She seriously tried to make this guy feel guilty about his experience of college in the friggin' 70s. In her last heckle she admitted that she hadn't even read his book. Only a portion of a review. I interrupted her the next time she spoke. You didn't even read the book. Pretty simple. Met with glorious applause from the rest of the gathered students and faculty. And a smile from the invited guest. Not really me. But I'm proud of it anyway. My stepson and I were on the bus to go swimming. He was about 4. There was a group of college-age boys, about the same age as I was at the time, being obnoxious. Loud. Lots of profanity. My stepson, being the brave little soul he is, decided to set them straight with. That's a bad word. Don't say bad words or mom will wash your mouth out with soap. The group were pretty shocked to be called out by a preschooler. They kinda looked at me and I gave them the eyebrow and tried not to laugh. They were much better behaved from then on. I was constantly made fun of throughout grade school. I lived in this small rural college town, where I was the only Indian kid in the whole middle school. In gym class there was this jackass farm boy who would sit behind me in line when we did attendance and would make fun of me every day. Normally I would tolerate it. But one day he went too far and called me Osama bin Laden. I charged at him and kicked him straight in the nose while he was sitting down. His nose shattered and the whole thing was broken up before he could even react. I received a day of in-school suspension and the jackass received a whole week. Plus the cops were called and he was charged with a hate crime. Needless to say, that F never bothered me again. Though it didn't stop me from being bullied by other people for the rest of the year. One of my friend. Being in a train for a 4 hours ride with a mother and her kid and another woman in the compartment. The kid, 5-ish, is a real pain. Screaming. Running everywhere. Jumping on seats and pissing everybody out. At some point, the nipper spits on the woman, who turns to the mother asking her to handle the kid properly. She replies something like, "You know, I really think that a kid should learn by himself and the best education is through discovery. That's why I don't want to put barriers." As the train enters the station, my friend stands up, spits on the mother, and just tell her, "You know what? My mother thinks just like you." Then leaves. A drunk ass in college, a relatively conservative college, yelled at me, "Go back to Cambodia. I am of Asian descent." I turned back to him and said, "Go back to Europe. We don't want him back." One day in math, this kid was pissed at my friend because my friend didn't do well on his test. And because he is Asian, the kid copied off his test. He said, "Aren't chinks supposed to be good at math?" The room goes silent and I said, "Aren't retardees supposed to have a helper with them?" The whole room started laughing except the teacher. She sent us both to the office. I was released after the principal stopped laughing at what I said. My good friend and I were waiting at a red light. Across the intersection there was a young couple, probably 20 years old. The guy was screaming at the girl so loudly we could hear it over the traffic. And his posture was so threatening we were both convinced he was about to hit her. As we passed them, I screamed out the window, "Don't talk to her that way." As my friend yelled, "Leave her alone. You f***ing asshole." We didn't plan to yell. We just happened to both be extremely angry about it. As I'm driving up the street, he throws his bike and backpack down and starts running after us, screaming that he would kill us and kill her too. And so on. As soon as he started running after us, I dialed the police and they caught up with him in the store a bit later. It turned out he had been suspected of domestic violence a few times before, but there was never sufficient witnesses evidence. And our report was the one that put him in jail. I was in Jersey City in a drugstore. A man who was in the store became angry at the security guard. He started cursing him and calling him a house NR and an Uncle Tom. I asked him to stop and the two of us started discussing the situation. He explained that he was angry because the security guard acted in a way that made him think he was under suspicion as a shoplifter. I guess this meant following him or whatever. As a backstory, both the man and the security guard were African American. I am white. I explained to him that he might be making the security guard feel bad, which would make him less receptive to the point the man was trying to make. I said that the security guard has feelings and does not like to be called such awful names. The two of us went outside and discussed it rationally for about 5-10 minutes. At the end we both came away feeling better, and the man said that he will try to be nicer and more considerate of other people's feelings.